Have you ever wondered how our ancestors lived millions of years ago? How did they interpret the phenomena of nature, the sunrise, eclipses, or the roar of thunder? Imagine being there, breathing the same air they breathed, hearing the roar of beasts and the rustle of trees in the wind. Get ready, because this is not an ordinary story. It is a journey straight into the heart of the Stone Age, where every gesture had deep meaning. And every decision could mean the difference between life and death. Millions of years ago, life was a constant battle. Primitive humans walked through dense forests, raging rivers and open plains, facing fierce predators that watched every move. But they were not merely survivors, they were keen observers of the world. They studied the cycles of the moon, the changes of the seasons, and the patterns of the stars. And slowly, they began to perceive something greater. There was order in nature, even if it manifested itself with violence and mystery. Fire was humanity's first great revolution. It was not just warmth or light, it was safety, it was power. Imagine the first spark that lit the darkness of a cave. Instant fear transformed into fascination, light dancing on the walls, illuminating paintings and marks made by curious hands. Around the fire, stories began to emerge. They were stories of hunting, invisible monsters, and spirits inhabiting rivers and forests. Each narrative strengthened community bonds and passed knowledge from generation to generation. At the same time, fire became a psychological weapon against the unknown. It kept animals away, illuminated territory, and, most importantly, awakened something within humans, the ability to imagine and believe in something beyond the visible. But life was not only about survival and fire. Death, for example, had its own sacred place in the minds of the primitive people. Burial was not simply placing a body in the ground. It was an attempt to communicate with the invisible. Marks on bones and cave walls show that they already believed in some form of existence after death. Some bodies were carefully positioned, adorned with stones, animal bones, or special leaves. Every gesture carried intentions: to protect the spirit, honor the deceased, or even appease unknown forces. There were those who wept in silence, and those who danced to celebrate the passage. And every funeral rite told stories of fear, love, and hope. Then there were the celestial phenomena, which challenged all understanding. Eclipses were one such moment. Imagine the moon swallowing the sun, plunging the earth into sudden darkness. For primitive peoples, it was not just a natural event. It was a warning, a judgment, or a message from the gods. Some fled in panic, others offered sacrifices, and all gathered to watch with a mix of fear and reverence. This fear of the unknown gave rise to stories, legends, and rituals that would pass from generation to generation. Each eclipse was a lesson in humility before the cosmos, and a reminder that despite all their strength, they were part of something much greater. And thunder, with its powerful roar, was perhaps the most impressive of all natural phenomena. Each lightning bolt lit up the sky, and each crash shook the ground, reminding primitive humans that they were not the only ones in the world. To them, thunder was not just sound, it was a divine voice, a manifestation of power and authority. Specific rituals arose to appease the thunder or seek protection, and the bravest tried to interpret its message. The following rain fertilized the land, but was also seen as a gift or a punishment. Fear and awe mingled, creating a deep connection between humans and nature, a bond that would become the foundation of all human spirituality. But life was not just isolated rituals. It was a constant learning process, a dance between the known and the unknown. Every discovery, like lighting fire, mastering tools, or interpreting signs of nature, had direct consequences. Those who learned quickly survived. Those who ignored the signs often did not. Each experience shaped the body, mind, and culture of evolving humanity. As night fell, fires cast long shadows over the caves, and the primitives looked at the starry sky, asking questions that still echo today. Why are we here? What happens after death? Who controls thunder and the sun? Each question was a seed of curiosity and knowledge. each partial answer a step in a journey that would take millions of years to shape modern humanity. Even the simplest rituals held impressive power. They connected the living to the dead, the visible to the invisible, the human to the divine. The simple act of lighting a fire, burying a loved one, or observing an eclipse carried profound meaning, shaping not only survival, but also the human soul. Now, imagine walking alongside them, feeling the smell of wet earth, hearing the roar of thunder, watching the sun disappear behind the moon. You begin to realize that every ritual, every fear, and every celebration is part of a story that still lives within us. Humanity, in its essence, has always been and will always be fascinated by the unknown. And it is this very fascination that drives us to seek meaning, create art, science, and culture. As time went on, our ancestors did not merely react to nature, they sought to understand it and influence it. Every discovery was a victory over fear, and every ritual an attempt to control the uncontrollable. The ritual of fire evolved into something almost sacred. Imagine a cave at night. The scent of burning wood mixes with the smell of damp earth. Around the fire, tribal leaders, perhaps the elders or the bravest, conducted dances, striking stones together to produce additional sparks, as if provoking spirits to manifest. Every gesture had precision and meaning, a wave of the arm, a leap over the flame, the throwing of a stone into the embers, all symbols of respect and requests for protection. Children learned not only to survive, but to interpret the world through signs and stories. Fire became a silent teacher, instructing about warmth, light, safety, and also about human nature itself. Curious, creative, and cautious all at once. Burial, on the other hand, carried layers of symbolism that went far beyond what we can imagine today. There were positioning rituals. The body could be placed on its side, facing the sunrise, or surrounded by carefully arranged stones, perhaps to mark territory or create a symbolic bridge between life and death. Some burials included offerings of food, tools, or even animal bones, gifts for the spirit's journey. And in certain caves, paintings beside the graves told stories of battles, harvests, and hunts, as if each funeral ritual was also a narrative of the life that had been lived. The fear of death coexisted with reverence and the hope that something transcended existence itself. Then came the eclipse, a phenomenon that could leave even the bravest in silence. Imagine the moon slowly covering the sun, plunging the earth into sudden shadows as if the world had paused for a moment. For tribes in different regions, this could mean famine, war, or the need for sacrifices to appease the gods. Some ritual leaders covered their faces and sang ancient chants, while others lit torches to ward off the darkness. The eclipse was the moment when fear transformed into faith, and faith into action. Thunder, meanwhile, was the personification of nature's uncontrollable force. When the sky lit up and thunder roared, there was a mixture of terror and fascination. Tribes believed that thunder could punish, protect, or announce profound changes. Specific rituals were performed, rhythmic dances, drum or stone beats, chants, and offerings, all to show the heavens that humans recognized the power and were asking for mercy. Some tribes even interpreted every lightning bolt and every crash as a coded message from the gods, learning to observe patterns, anticipate rain, and protect the group. But the most remarkable thing is that even amid all the fear, there was also joy, celebration, and communion. The fire illuminated sweaty, smiling faces, children ran among the dancing shadows, and stories were told with emotion, suspense, and humor, primordial forms of entertainment and learning. Each ritual was, in a sense, a lesson in humanity, teaching courage, cooperation, and respect for the unknown. Over time, the rituals began to merge, creating almost cinematic experiences. On one night, the eclipse covers the sky while rain falls with distant thunder, and the group celebrates life around the fire. The body of a newly buried ancestor is remembered, their stories recounted so no one forgets. Every gesture is a link between generations, each ritual a bridge between past and future. And this is where the story becomes even more fascinating. Stone Age rituals were not mere superstition. They were the birth of human consciousness, culture, spirituality, and social intelligence. Every fear faced, every dance, every offering shaped not only the body, but also the mind and soul. Humanity was learning to see the world with curiosity, courage, and respect. As millennia passed, tribes began to spread out and come into contact with one another. Not all encounters were peaceful. The same thunder that inspired respect could also be used as an argument of power. Tribal leaders who claimed to control the skies or speak with the gods gained authority. Some groups created legends about warriors or shamans who could summon lightning, control rain, or protect the tribe from giant beasts. Each story was a lesson and a warning. Knowledge and courage brought power, ignorance brought death. Meanwhile, the ritual of fire evolved into increasingly complex festivals. In some tribes, lighting the fire at the exact moment of an eclipse or after a thunderclap was seen as a way to align the human world with the spiritual world. These ceremonies combined dance, song, and storytelling, and some could last all night. Fire, which had begun as a survival necessity, became the epicenter of social and spiritual life. Every spark was interpreted as a message, every flame an expression of the invisible. Funerary rituals also became more sophisticated. Beyond carefully burying the dead, the first signs of memorialization appeared. Cave paintings, stone markers, and ornaments made from animal bones or shells. Some tribes believed that the soul of the deceased remained near the fire, watching the living, and that maintaining the correct rituals ensured protection for the entire community. This care generated something extraordinary: collective memory, the ability to pass on experiences, values, and knowledge even after death. Thunder, the most unpredictable and terrifying phenomenon, began to shape morality and leadership. People noticed patterns. When certain rituals were performed, it seemed that rain came or lightning decreased. This created the first spiritual leaders, shamans, healers, or oracles, who interpreted the invisible and guided the tribe. They were both feared and respected, and their decisions often determined everyone's survival. The fear of thunder, of the unknown, transformed into respect and practical wisdom, a mix of primitive science and spirituality. Over time, these experiences gave rise to the first structured legends. Stories about eclipses as devourers of the sun, thunder as celestial warriors, or the fire flame as a divine gift began to be told with specific details. Children learned to interpret the world, not only with their eyes, but with their hearts and minds. Every legend, every ritual shaped the tribe's character, creating cohesion, morality, and identity. And the most amazing thing is that even in the face of fear, there was joy, humor, and celebration. Imagine dancing around the fire after an eclipse or a storm. Drums beating in the rhythm of the heart, songs echoing through the caves, children's laughter, and improvised applause from the elders. Each ritual was not just survival, but also an affirmation of life, a celebration of humanity amid nature's chaos. These rituals and legends, passed down through generations, began to build human consciousness, a sense of belonging, the ability to imagine the invisible, the skill to interpret patterns, predict the future, and organize societies. Fear, which initially paralyzed, became a powerful tool. It taught respect, attentiveness, cooperation, and creativity. And this is where the story reaches an even deeper level. Every thunderclap, every eclipse, every firelit, every careful burial was not just an isolated event, but a piece of a puzzle that, millions of years later, would make us who we are. The search for meaning, the admiration of the unknown, fascination with the supernatural, and the ability to teach one another all began with simple Stone Age rituals. Over the ages, small human groups realized that they could not merely react to nature, they had to dialogue with it. Thunder was no longer just a fearsome roar, the eclipse no longer just a fleeting shadow, and fire no longer just warmth. Each phenomenon became a sign, a riddle to interpret, and from those signs arose the first complex systems of belief. Shamans, healers, and spiritual leaders began to assume central roles within the tribe. They did not merely perform rituals to appease invisible gods. They also organized daily life. A shaman could predict hunting patterns, interpret animal behavior, or indicate the right moment to plant roots and hunt large prey. The group's decisions began to depend on the knowledge passed down by these spiritual leaders, and with that, the first combination of faith and strategy emerged, a balance between superstition, observation, and practical wisdom. Legends and sacred stories became more structured. Eclipses were told as battles between light and darkness, thunder as the roar of divine warriors, fire as a gift stolen from the heavens. Each narrative carried encoded lessons: respect for elders, care for the community, courage in the face of danger, and the importance of cooperating with others. Human imagination, guided by fear and fascination, was shaping culture, morality, and social consciousness, but not everything was harmonious. Conflicts arose between tribes, driven by competition for resources and the desire to control the most powerful rituals. Some leaders used fear of the unknown to impose authority, while others sought alliances through the sharing of knowledge and rituals. Fire, eclipse ceremonies, thunder rituals, and burial practices became instruments of diplomacy, power, and even symbolic warfare. It was a world of delicate balance, where every action could mean life or death, prosperity or disaster. Meanwhile, burial rituals evolved into something even more meaningful. Some tribes began creating elaborate tombs, marked with stones and symbols, almost like temples of memory. Respect for the dead became a link between past and present, reminding the living of their origins, their ancestors, and the responsibility to protect the community. This care for collective memory was one of the first steps toward history and civilization. Fire, always central, now assumed multiple meanings: protection, light warmth, but also symbolism of power and knowledge. Tribes that mastered advanced fire control techniques attracted allies and earned the respect of rivals. Bonfires became centers of teaching, conveying not only tales of terror or hunting, but also knowledge about plants, animals, weather, and the behavior of the tribe itself. Each spark illuminated not only the cave, but the minds of those who watched. And then there was thunder, whose force continued to impress. But now, some leaders were able to interpret it, predict storms, harness rain for crops, and use this knowledge to consolidate authority. Fear of thunder transformed into applied wisdom, and the tribe learned that understanding natural phenomena was as vital as surviving them. In the end, each ritual, each myth, and each story was forming an invisible legacy: human consciousness, a sense of community, morality, and the power of narrative. It was the beginning of what, millions of years later, we call culture, science, religion, and history. Humanity was learning to observe, question, imagine, and teach. And the most fascinating part, it all began with fear, curiosity, and respect, a perfect combination for the evolution of the mind. Now, imagine an entire tribe gathered around a great fire. A dark night, lightning in the distance, an eclipse covering the sky, and leaders conducting chants and rituals. Children watch, learn, and dream. Every gesture, every word, every symbol etched on the cave walls is a link connecting humanity's deep past to the present and future. As millennia passed, the rituals that began with fear and survival began to leave deep marks on the human psyche. Every thunderclap, every firelit, every burial, and every eclipse was not just a fleeting event. They were lessons engraved in humanity's cultural DNA. Tribes became societies, stories transformed into myths, and myths became beliefs. What began as acts of protection and understanding of the unknown evolved into religion, philosophy, science, and art. Now imagine the first humans looking at the sky during an eclipse. They feared the darkness, but they were also awed by the spectacle. That same fascination led us to study the planets, calculate orbits, and even send probes into space. Fear of thunder transformed into respect for physics, and burial rituals gave rise to history, collective memory, and the concept of legacy. Every primitive gesture carried the potential to transform human perception of the world. Fire, which began as a necessity for survival, is now a symbol of progress. It lights cities, warms homes, drives technology, and connects people. Yet in essence, it remains the same fire that kept our ancestors alive, gathered them around caves, and shaped the first stories, rituals, and lessons about life. What we feel before a flame still awakens something ancient within us, the capacity to imagine, teach and create community. Primitive burials, with stones and ornaments, evolved into complex funeral rites, memorials, literature, and history. Awareness of death, the cycle of life, the passage of time, and respect for those who came before all began with a simple act, placing someone in the ground with care and reverence. This act shaped humanity, giving us ethics, morality, and empathy, and thunder. Thunder. Its roar, which once inspired absolute fear, now inspires science, poetry, and music. It taught us to listen, observe patterns, and interpret signs. It showed us that the unknown need not be feared. It can be understood, decoded, and even celebrated. And here is the most powerful point of this story. Everything we are today, our curiosity, our capacity to create, question, organize societies, teach, and learn, was born from what our ancestors did in the face of the unknown. Every Stone Age ritual was a seed planted in fertile soil that grew over millions of years, eventually making us the complex, creative, and reflective species we are today. So the next time you look at the sky during an eclipse, hear distant thunder, light a flame, or think of someone who has passed, remember, you are connected to millions of years of history. Fear, courage, fascination, and ritual. You are walking the same paths that our ancestors walked, feeling, learning, and transforming the world just as they did. And, at its core, the truth is this: fear, awe, and the need to understand the world have always been engines of human evolution. And every gesture we make today is an echo of millions of years of history, a story that began around a fire, in the darkness, with the roar of thunder and the light of a distant star.